This show has been made with the help and support of Trish Stretton. Welcome to the kiwimana Bay. Well, is beekeeping the antidote for the 21st century? We talked to Nigel Costley, and maybe it is so, along with feral bees. This is
episode 129 of our beekeeping podcast. And I'm Gary.
And I'm Margaret, and welcome.
And we love honeybees, and we are kiwimana, and we are beekeepers that live in the Waitakere Ranges on the wild west coast. And it's not so wild lately. It's been very sunny, eh?
Yeah, wild west coast of Auckland in New Zealand. So kiwimana is a place where the beekeeping community can share a conversation and connect. And we also, if that wasn't enough, build and sell some beekeeping supplies. We teach beginner beekeepers and provide beekeeper services and advice. And we are the Bees Knees Club Facebook group.
That's right, and it's great to have you joining us today. We know life is busy, and we appreciate that you're taking the time to join us today. And so thanks so much for being part of the Kiwimana Buzz. And, life is busy, and, maybe bees are the answer to the 21st century and all this high-speed living.
Well, that's true, and if you're crazy like a feral bee, maybe you're part of that answer.
Exactly. And we had a great talk with Nigel, didn't we?
Absolutely, and he's an interesting guy, and just you guys are going to love this because it's going to give you some views on things that you may not have heard before, and based in what New Zealand was doing, eh?
Yep, that's right. So if you've got any comments, good or bad, just leave them on kiwi.bz/Nigel.
Okay, and this show has been put together with the help of
our amazing supporters. Especially this month, we'd like to thank Barbara Weber. Barbara has been supporting the Kiwimana Buzz since March 2018.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and we hope all is well over in New South Wales, Barbara, and for you and your bees. So I hope the season's starting off well there for you. And thanks for your support. Awesome.
And, all your support is so gratefully received. So thanks, guys, and enjoy.
Yes, and this interview was recorded on the 1st of September 2018. So it was recorded on the first day of spring.
That's not long ago. Geez, Gary, you're moving along there, aren't you?
I am indeed.
That's it. And Nigel Costley has been a beekeeper for over 40 years.
He's currently a beekeeping tutor and a freelance journalist, and he's based in Nelson in New Zealand.
Oh, sunny Nelson.
And he's also the host of the popular BeeSotted podcast, which we're hoping will have a season 2 coming soon, hopefully. And he's officially known as Nelson's top bee bore.
Oh, tell us more about that one, Gary.
Yeah, so hi Nigel.
Morning, Gary.
Is it true you've been known as the Nelson's top bee bore? Was that a self-titled thing?
Yeah, that's right. Yes, I can bore you stiff and within 5 minutes. What you got to realise, bee enthusiasts tend to get a bit carried away and, can rave on a wee bit. And my poor, long-suffering wife has often rolled her eyes skyward and said, you realise you've been raving on about bees for ages, and you don't, of course, because you're so enthused about the subject. But you just got to be careful when you're in company, particularly people who aren't beekeepers, that they are interested in bees, but only for 2 minutes. Yeah, do you ever find that?
Yeah, you got to look out for that glaze over look.
Yeah, when people sort of slump forward, head first onto the desk, it's a sort of giveaway. you might have overdone it a bit. With fellow beekeepers, they like that sort of thing. Depends on who you're talking to. And I mean, I've given quite a few presentations to different groups who aren't beekeepers, and I'm very mindful that, they want a bit of human interest and a bit of history and a bit of current affairs and other topics woven into the beekeeping to make digestible. So it really depends on who your audience or your company is at the time, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Well, you're among friends here, Nigel, so don't worry.
Yeah, I can rate off. Yeah.
Nigel, what do you love about bees?
I suppose, like many people, I work at a computer much of the time. I mean, my profession is journalism, and, it's a wonderful job, but of course it's a very artificial, sterile environment, and it's just great to get away into the natural world, a bit like gardening, I suppose, and you just get immersed in this magical world that the beehive is. Yeah, I think it's a wonderful antidote to the hassles and stress of modern life. That's what I like about it. And I mean, I've sort of been a hobbyist, semi-commercial beekeeper, so my livelihood isn't dependent on having a high rate of production. So I think I'm lucky in that sense. I'm sort of straddle the hobbyist commercial divide in that way. Yeah, and it's endlessly fascinating too. I mean, once you start delving into bees and then learning about plant life and then learning about land use, and it has an enormous sort of flow-on effect. I mean, after 40 years of beekeeping, I'm just as fascinated as ever I was, because, for every question you answer, 10 new ones crop up. Do you find that? I mean, how long have you been beekeeping?
About 8 or 9 years now.
Oh, crikey, yeah. You're just a bloody fly-by-nighter, mate.
Just a beginner. Yeah, beginner.
You're just a beginner. You've got a world of fun ahead of you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How did you first get started then with bees?
Well, I was very lucky. We're going back into ancient history here, so this is 1978. We just moved up to Nelson from Christchurch.
Was that just after the war, was it?
Yeah, that's right. I'm not sure if it was Boer War or Crimean War, one of those wars. And we were living at the Glen, which is a lovely little rural settlement just out of Nelson. Beautiful spot, full of gardens and farms and stuff. And I saw this course being advertised on beekeeping. I thought, that sounds interesting. I'll give that a go. And as it happened, it was run by none other than the illustrious Andrew Matheson.
Wow.
He of the great textbook.
Yeah.
And he was working for, it was MAF in those days, as an apicultural advisor in Nelson City. So he ran the course, and of course you could scarcely imagine a better way of starting beekeeping than under the guidance of someone like Andrew. So he got us started. Yeah, it was fantastic. Built a beehive, got a few elementary things about inspections and disease and such, got the ball rolling, and it was a great way to start.
Yeah, because isn't he a diplomat now or something?
I think he probably got fed up with beekeeper politics. I'm not really sure. I haven't seen him in many years, but someone told me he transitioned to the diplomatic corps, and also he was very much involved in the World War I commemoration business too. But I'm not sure. I've not heard or seen of him for a long time. He certainly doesn't seem to be in beekeeping, active in beekeeping. So maybe he had enough. He was academic. He had a degree in entomology, but he was a very, very practical guy, and as is evidence in his book, really good sort of feet on the ground, getting started stuff as well.
Yeah, no, it's a great book, and they've just released the 5th edition, haven't they?
Yeah, well, we use it in the course that I teach, the Taratahi beekeeping course. That's our standard text. It's unbeatable, really. I find that because it deals with New Zealand conditions too. That's the other issue. There's a lot of stuff out there, but some of it, of course, pertains to America or Europe, and it's not necessarily any good to New Zealand.
I mean, do you want to briefly talk about the courses offered at Taratahi that could help local people in Nelson to learn bees? Yeah,
well, it's a level 3 course, so it's standardised through New Zealand qualification. It's designed to get people into beekeeping, get a hive of your own. You build a hive, that's one of the first field days, and then you work through the whole season, about 8 months in all, including a lot of things like disease control. Brood inspections, of course, is a huge thing. Feeding hives, moving hives, the whole gamut, really, right through to honey extraction and wintering down. So the idea is at the end of it, you will have had 15 field days of supervised beekeeping handling that will put you in good stead to carry on and build on that in subsequent seasons. So I think it has an academic theory component, but it's fairly modest, I think, and it's really aimed to get people competent in the apiary.
Is it aiming for people to get into commercial beekeeping?
Yeah, I think it's a good stepping stone for that. And one of the last things we do is your DECA course, the AFB recognition course, which certifies that you're competent in recognising and dealing with AFB, which of course is recognised as an important qualification in the industry. So some of my students do go on to either work for a commercial beekeeper or set up a little backyard business of their own. But many of them are just going to be hobbyists with a few hives out the back, and that's fine.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, you touched on the DECA course there. Do you think New Zealand would ever be AFB free if all the beekeepers work together? Do you think that's possible?
Well, that's the goal. It sounds, super ambitious, and I guess it's the old, if you aim for the stars, you might hit the ceiling type of thing. It's certainly feasible to lower the rate, and we know from the figures that have been kept, when beekeepers do focus on it and work cooperatively, you can lower the rate, by a factor of 10. So we know that beekeepers are both the problem and the solution. Certainly worth aiming for. And of course, it's not just the AFB, but I think if you've got good AFB protocols, you've probably got good management techniques for other things as well. You're better organised. You're probably on top of your Varroa. You've got a good hygienic, well-organised setup. It has a knock-on effect over and above just the pure AFB aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think we'll ever have a Varroa-resistant bee in New Zealand? Do you think that's possible?
Well, I know breeders are working towards it, and there's some that are claiming quite a bit of success. I've trialled a few myself. They definitely have a lower mite count than other varieties. I think the long-term prognosis, though, is probably fairly pessimistic, because as long as you're treating for Varroa, you're not allowing the natural selection to take place, which would, in the wild, would lead to a more resilient bee. So I think it's going to be an ongoing struggle myself, and that's why I posit the theory that it would be worth New Zealand looking at re-establishing feral bees with a view to populating them with bees from a VSH strain, and then allowing natural selection to produce a Varroa-resistant bee in the wild. I know it's highly speculative and it's probably fraught with many difficulties in a technical sense, but I think that's a better long-term prognosis than human intervention. I guess, in essence, I've got more faith in nature than I have human intervention.
Yeah, because we've talked in the past about Tom Seeley's work in New York.
I'm not familiar with him. He doesn't treat for Varroa?
No, he's finding that the bees in a certain forest in New York State are actually becoming more resistant because they're not treating for bees. They're not treating for mites, obviously.
Yep.
So, do we need to find somewhere in New Zealand that's far enough away from commercial beekeeping? That's the strategy?
Yeah, it would be a hell of a big project and would need an awful lot of funding coordination. But I was inspired by communicating with UK beekeepers, specifically a guy called Ron Hoskins in Swindon, and he hasn't treated for Varroa in 22 years. He breeds a VSH trait in his bees, and so this is a grooming trait where the bees learn how to evict the Varroa from the bodies, both of the adult bee but also the pupal stage as well. So it's quite sophisticated behaviour. And so he's had a lot of success doing that. And the interesting thing was when the virologists came along and examined the viruses in Ron's Varroa, they discovered a different strain of virus from the one that is usually lethal to the bees, like the deformed wing virus. And so it gets back to the idea that parasites don't want to kill their host. If you let them be, often there's an equilibrium that's struck between the parasite and the host where both can coexist. And in this case, the sort of Varroa that was on his hive were producing a virus that was actually protecting the bees from the lethal viruses like deformed wing. So it was actually more a symbiotic relationship. And apparently that's often quite common in nature if you allow, and of course the key thing is if you allow natural selection to take its course. So it's a long-term view. But it's quite interesting and it makes a world of difference in the long term. So that's why I think there's a prospect of that in New Zealand. But of course, the commercial beekeepers wouldn't be interested in that because, of course, their losses would be colossal and they couldn't possibly tolerate that. So it would have to be an area set up free from treated bees because that would interfere with the natural selection process. But you would have to think maybe after several generations, a strain of bee would emerge that was resilient to Varroa. Otherwise, it just wouldn't exist. It would have to have other characteristics as well. It'd have to be, good honey gatherer and fend off the wasps and overwinter and all the rest of it. But I think it would be a very, very worthwhile long-term project for the beekeeping industry to embrace. Very unifying one too, because our industry is very fractured, and they're all fighting each other, and there's a lot of unhappiness and bitterness about what's going on. And I think there's in some places there's certainly a pillage mentality. It's a bit like overfishing our fish stocks, isn't it? And this would be something long-term, forward-thinking that we could be proud both as beekeepers and citizens to stand in front of our great-great-grandchildren and say we did something with a bit of foresight for future generations.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, we'd have to find a forest, where quite a big area, of course, where you could set it up. But I think it's feasible. I've had absolutely zero interest from any scientists or commercial beekeepers on the idea so far, but I'll plug away and see if I can raise some interest. But it obviously would be a long-term project.
Yeah, what about areas of the west coast of the South Island? Because there's a lot of remote areas there, eh?
There are, yeah. And I mean, traditionally, the areas that best suit wild bees are deciduous forests, your oak trees and ash and lime trees of Europe, with these big hollow spaces in them that make ideal bees' nests. So whether native trees could fulfill the same function, I'm not really sure. But yeah, you'd need to have a fairly isolated into the sort of thousands of hectares in terms of size for it to happen. And it would be fascinating to study the bees in that environment as compared to managed bees, because of course we're only used to dealing with managed bees, and I think bees in the wild are a completely different specimen. It's a bit like taking lions off the Serengeti plain and putting them in a cage and studying them. That's how we are with our managed bees, and assuming that we are learning something true and natural about the species. But we know that with lions that's ridiculous, because we've so modified their environment we are not seeing them in their natural state. So I think something similar might pertain to bees in the wild, that we would learn an awful lot that we're currently quite ignorant about. But the most important thing is that it would provide, I don't think you can future-proof any population, but it would certainly give our bee population an extra genetic diversity that they wouldn't have under Varroa-treated management system.
Yeah, I mean, even though, like you say, oak trees are probably not very common in the New Zealand native forests, but I mean, you could probably set up like bait hives. You could do.
I mean, you're looking, as I say, at this stage, I haven't done all the homework required as to, the requirements and what have you. But I just think it's an idea that's worth discussing and scoping and seeing if something happens.
Have you talked to people like Peter Dearden about that?
I have. Peter's a very good chap, but he's awfully busy. He's got so much on his plate. I think when something like this comes along, it's just, perhaps in the too hard basket. I'm not really sure. But I mean, and all the commercial guys, of course, are so preoccupied with trying to run their businesses and stay afloat in a highly, competitive and dynamic marketplace that they probably haven't got too much time for these sort of ideas.
Maybe it needs like a non-profit sort of situation to do it, eh?
I think it would have to be. I know people like the Morgan Foundation put serious funding into environmental projects, and this might be something that would be of interest to them. But of course, you'd have to do a lot of preparatory work in terms of projected costs and what have you. So we're at early stages of that. So if there's anyone out there with a bit of expertise in that field, I'd love to hear from them. As I say, I think it would be something that would be very unifying in terms of a grand project to bring what is a very fraught and in many ways fractured industry together and into something that we could all work together. Sounds like a spiritual coming on.
Oh, you've got to have aspirational goals, Nigel. You have to.
Well, I think you do, and there's always a balance struck between idealism and hard-nosed, practicality. I do definitely think we need some element of idealism in beekeeping, because at the moment it is fraught with a very cynical and competitive ethic, which can be quite destructive.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to get people to sing from the same choir sheet, isn't it, sometimes? Putting it mildly.
Certainly when they see each other as rivals, that can be the issue, can't it? I mean, beekeepers always had a certain rivalry, but usually it's been fairly good-natured and, conducted on a gentlemanly basis. But now that there's such big money involved, those rivalries have become quite antagonistic. Not so bad around Nelson, because we haven't got the issue of big money manuka, but certainly in those places where there are, I think it can lead to some very toxic relations between beekeepers.
Oh, yeah, the old manuka madness.
Well, yeah, and I mean, what we're finding is a lot of the beekeepers don't even know who their neighbours are, because they just come into an area, plonk in 50 hives with absolutely no consultation or communication with their neighbours. And they don't want to really, because that would mean that they might have to treat them with some consideration and ethics. For any professional group, that's a terrible predicament to be in, isn't it? In terms of work together collaboratively, you see the guy next door as the enemy, and I know there's some places where that's a big issue. We're quite lucky in Nelson. We've got commercial beekeepers, but we haven't got that manuka gold rush mentality.
Yeah, I mean, do you think big problem with people not registering their hives as well?
Well, there is. I was hearing that the MPI did some surveying recently in some unspecified area where 48% of the aphids they found were unregistered.
God, 48%.
It's shocking, isn't it? And then there's got things like annual disease returns and all these sort of issues, and many beekeepers just ignore those and don't seem to suffer any too severe consequences. So that's another issue, that you've got a lot of beekeepers who are conscientious and mindful of their responsibilities, and they're knocking themselves out to do the right thing, and then they look over the fence and see these guys, getting away with these sort of behaviours, and think, well, hang on a minute,
hold the horse.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. So this is another issue. I know AFB management are very mindful of this and are making steps to try and improve it through better communication and encouraging people to register and do their annual disease returns. But there is quite a strong element out there that not compliant, and not only not compliant, it's not like just they're a bit forgetful, deliberate and persistent, non-compliant.
I know in Auckland there's some commercial people that set up shops here, like around where we live. There's set up about 20 hives and none of them are registered.
Yeah.
They were found to have AFB. Did get destroyed by the government after a few months, but it's just,
Yeah. Part of the issue is as our legal system very much weighted in favour of the individual. To take legal proceedings against people is an enormously expensive and lengthy and resource-draining exercise that MPI is understandably reluctant to do. And I think there's quite a body of beekeepers who dine out on that situation. I'm not really quite sure what you can do about it.
No, I think you're right. There needs to be penalties.
Well, I know they try persuasion and they try and getting alongside people who are persistent offenders. And sometimes there are just problems of people with things like, I know, literacy is a big issue for many beekeepers. I know quite a few very talented beekeepers who are just not good at paperwork. Their reading and writing skills are poor, so they could do with some support and encouragement, and they may improve their compliance. But I also think there is a body of willfully difficult people who know that they can get away with it.
And there's people out there that don't know what AFB looks like.
I know. Well, that's why things like Flow Hive worry me. When it first came on, and people, this is great. You stick a tube in their honey box, and your honey comes out, and you don't have to worry about the silly brood inspection business. Well, no, that's not a good idea. People that even would think like that are a bit of a worry, aren't they?
Yeah. It makes beekeeping easier because you just put them in your garden, and then 3 months later you just turn the tap on.
Well, that's right. And actually, one of your questions, Gary, was what's the biggest mistake you see beekeepers making? One of them is being seduced by all this labour-saving technology, which I'll just use the example of the flow hive, which looks quite seductive from in many ways, but the knock-on effect in terms of your beekeeping practice, I think, can be very detrimental. I mean, there's so much gear out there now. I get these catalogues from all the suppliers. They're about 50 pages of stuff, and I mean, some of the gear may be very handy, but I think it can also lead people astray. And often, rather than enhance people's beekeeping, I think it can be detrimental, because then they think, oh, well, I don't have to do this. I don't have to do your... And, of course, beekeeping is based on doing a lot of brood inspections. That's the foundation of it, isn't it? Thorough, careful, laborious, because it takes a lot of time, brood inspections. And when you hear people coming up with ideas and gadgets that will somehow short-circuit all that, little alarm bells start ringing in my head, and I start going all, Luddite and crusty about the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard of things like that, like cameras that can detect AFB and stuff, I think. Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess that's true of all technology, isn't it? It always has a mixed result in terms of benefit and harm, but I think in beekeeping, it's good to keep things simple, and I certainly advocate from a teaching point of view is to stick with the basic stuff in the first instance and get a few seasons experience just doing those core brood inspection type activities, and then maybe down the track you might find some of these other technologies might be handy, but don't think of them as being a quick jump into successful beekeeping without having done the spade work first.
Exactly.
I'm sounding like an old headmaster, aren't I?
Well, no, you've got to get the basics right, and I think the fundamental thing is you've got to learn what normal looks like.
You do, and there's no short circuit with that. You just got to do a lot of hive handling to get familiar with that. And for some people, and that's another thing. We live in this fast-paced world where people have got 100 things on the go, and they think if they can make something quicker and easier, then you should do it because it'll save time, and that's another, you should look forward to your brood inspections. I mean, it's fantastic. You see all this marvellous stuff going on and learn all about, the world of the hive, which is a little, world within a world. It's a little city and everything's going on there. And you should relish doing that. If it takes an hour, that's great because that hour is well spent. But the idea that you can somehow bypass it with a gadget or a phone app or something and save yourself some time, to me it's just a bad idea.
Yeah, exactly. Because you were involved when the Varroa first arrived in the South Island, eh? What was that like?
It was quite an experience actually, because we discovered it in June of 2006, early in the piece, and MPI came down in large numbers to do inspections of the region, and found that we'd caught it early and it was pretty much contained to Nelson City. So the game plan was that if we had a 10-kilometre exclusion zone around where the original Varroa was found, which was in Stoke, which is a suburb of Nelson, either destroyed all the feral bees in that area and shipped out all the managed bees, we might be able to nip it in the bud. There was, maybe for 3 or 4 months, a feeling of optimism that this was possible. And it really drew the beekeepers together in a way that I'd never seen before. People like some of the honey producers from Canterbury came up and joined in the teams of beekeepers. So we'd surveyed the whole area, top of the South Island, and found that it had been pretty much contained to this one area. The government put $1 million into buying the hives in that 10-kilometre radius. Was sent up north, so the beekeepers got compensated with that. They spent a lot of time going around killing all the feral bees in that area. We really thought that we had done something quite amazing and apparently never been done anywhere in the world before. But, beekeepers again. What happened, I think, there's different theories about what happens, and I can't be categorical about this, but what we think happened was that come November, with the kiwi fruit pollination, which was in the periphery to this 10-kilometre exclusion zone. So there were kiwi fruit orchards just on the edge of that. They brought hives in at that time because to compensate the kiwi fruit growers for loss of production would have been into the tens of millions of dollars, and the government weren't prepared to dump up that much money. So they were prepared to put in a little bit, but not that much. So those hives came in to the periphery of the exclusion zone in November. And then subsequently, just before Christmas, we started to pick up Varroa up country. And what we suspect happened was we'd done a pretty good job in eliminating Varroa within that region because of mobile beekeeping. They'd picked up some residual Varroa from that region and brought it back up country. And suddenly the horse had bolted. And by Christmas, we were picking up on a whole lot of Varroa being found in the 50 k's or so out from the exclusion zone. So our hearts sank. We were really disappointed that it didn't pan out. And they tried to put movement controls into the province. I think there was a cut-off at Murchison where you couldn't take hives south of Murchison. But lo and behold, it turned up at Rangiora, 400 kilometres away, shortly afterwards in the new year. So what had happened, obviously, is some numbskull beekeeper had taken hives out of the area, took down there, and next thing you know, it's all over the South Island. I mean, part of the problem is migratory beekeeping is an incredibly difficult thing to contain disease. So much beekeeping is predicated on shunting hives about in huge volumes, and also congestion too, of course, because you've got lots of hives cheek by jowl. It means that containing these sort of diseases is almost impossible in those circumstances. A bold attempt, but in the end, a noble failure.
Well, I mean, at least you gave it a go, eh?
We did, and it was great to see so many beekeepers coming together, commercial hobbyists, guys from outside the area, and there were guys. There was a guy, Matt Davidson, a local queen raiser, who raised money, took money out of his own pocket and raised it from orchardists and other beekeepers. Put some of their own money as well as a huge amount of time into the project. So, it really did have a sense of camaraderie and common purpose that was quite remarkable. And, we were all, really shattered when the whole thing fell over. And when you look back on the whole thing, perhaps it was doomed from the start. But at the time, it looked quite promising.
Yeah, just and probably caused by one person, do you think, or one beekeeper?
Well, who knows? We don't know how it got to Auckland in 2000.
Oh, there's lots of rumours.
There's lots of rumours, but no one really knows. And some people think it was industrial sabotage or people trying to bring different strains of bees, and it's all possible.
Well, I think the first lot was around the container area in Onehunga, so they suspect it might have been from a container. It might have been on some flowers or something.
Yep. I mean, a little swarm in a corner of a container could go unnoticed, tucked away, and that's feasible too.
They don't look at every container, despite what you might think.
Oh no! Well, the volume's just huge, isn't it? There's no way, you could do thorough inspections of the number of containers coming in. So.
And they're probably looking inside the container, not there's a little hole with a swarm flying in and out. Yeah.
Whereabouts in Auckland are your apiaries, Gary?
West Auckland. We're sort of, the Waitaki Ranges?
Waitaki?
Yeah, that's where we live.
Okay, and is that semi-suburban or completely rural?
Pretty much rural. It's predominantly native bush and a bit of pasture.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it's sort of...
Yeah.
We escaped from Auckland, so it's good.
Yeah, that's good for you.
We see it on TV occasionally.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Oh, I know.
It sounds idyllic, yeah.
Oh, we're about probably 50 minutes from Queen Street.
Yeah, that's plenty.
Yeah, it's further. I mean, I work there every day, so it's not like I escape.
Oh, do you? Oh, you commute, do you?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Oh, well, you've always got plenty of good podcasts to listen to on your travels.
Yeah, this is why I create them, so I can listen to them again. Yeah.
It's a very good medium, not just for beekeeping, but for all sorts of things. I've become quite a fan of the format. I think there's something about hearing a story rather than seeing a story, which has its virtues, because you've got to create your own images, haven't you? And it entails more of the audience than just seeing a lot of spectacular images.
Yeah, no, exactly, and it was such a thrill that we had another New Zealand podcast for a while.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so we're waiting for season 2, Nigel.
Oh, well, I think it might be waiting a while. At the moment, there's no plans for it. Most enjoyable to do. And Taratahi sponsored it. Bless them. At this stage, it could go on endlessly, but I've got other projects on the boil. So at this stage, there's no plans to do another one. But certainly the initial one was most enjoyable, and we get stats from the radio station, and they tell me the last one that we've got over 600 streams from there over the last month, which is quite respectable.
Oh, that's good.
It is. So initially it was very low, maybe a dozen, 20 either downloads or streams, but so it certainly hasn't sunk without trace.
Did you ever listen to Nick Wallingford's podcast?
No, I didn't, but I'd be very interested in. Is it on your show?
No. He used to do a New Zealand podcast about bees in 2006.
Oh, right.
I'll have to try and find you the link for you.
No, but I remember I met Nick. He was president of the NBA. Ooh, must be sort of 20-something years ago. Yeah, I thought he was a very good chap. I think he was frustrated trying to bring reforms to the beekeepers, but I I think beekeeper politics is an inherently frustrating business. But he gave it a good shot, and I thought he did really well. And so he's in Tauranga, isn't he?
Yeah, I think he's in Tauranga. I've got his contact details, but I'll try and find it for you.
So, and his podcast is online?
It's online. I'll try and find it for you. And if I can, I can always post you a CD of them all.
Oh, okay. Well, don't do that. There's probably a link that where I can find it.
It's kind of about the history of beekeeping in New Zealand. It's quite interesting. Do you have any funny beekeeping experiences that you want to share?
Well, I have some embarrassing ones. Yes, I mean, I think any beekeeper that's been around for long enough has some shoot self in foot type experiences. I think probably my funniest one was I'd only been beekeeping for one season, and I sort of fancied myself as a bit of a bee whisperer, how you do. I had these bees, and they were very gentle, and you didn't need much smoking. So one day I was working them. It was about this time of year, early spring. I didn't bother with a silly protective clothing business.
Yeah, it's not needed.
I was just wearing, shorts and T-shirts. Lovely day, bees were gentle. What could possibly go wrong? So everything was going swimmingly until I hoisted the top box off the one below and had failed to detach the frames from the bottom box. And of course, I whipped it up in the air, and of course, in doing so, fired up all these frames from the bottom box, which proceeded to cascade off my front thighs and legs, firing all these furious bees onto my unprotected body. So, exit stage right, arms flailing like windmills, and, sort of a Morris dance on amphetamines type thing. But the chaos was sort of compounded because I had a goat. Our goat Pippin was tethered just behind the hive, and as I sort of galloped past, a big swarm of bees detached themselves from me and jumped onto her and started stinging her, and she started bleating and squealing and carrying on like crazy. So
yeah, I didn't sign up for this.
Yeah, that's right. It's cruelty to animals and all that. The SPCA would have been horrified. Anyway, I dashed in, grabbed my protective gear, went back out, hauled the poor old goat and her A-frame away from the disaster. It was just absolute pandemonium. Went back and put everything back together in a hurry, and by that stage, I just had countless stings. I sort of staggered back inside. Fortunately, my wife was home, and she helped extract some of the stings. We lost count at about 40 stings, and she splashed this calamine lotion all over me. And, I think I sort of passed out slightly, but the amazing thing was the next day I was completely recovered, and apart from a couple of sort of little red blotches, you wouldn't have known there'd been much wrong. And I think it kind of fired up my immune system to the point where it can tolerate bee venom. And even today, not that I get stung a lot, but I tend not to react to bee stings. I don't like it. I mean, they're still sore, but my body just doesn't tend to react to it. And I think that experience probably shocked the immune system.
You became the bee man.
I did, and it was like a initiation ceremony. How they have in the sort of Amazonian tribes where to test the warriors, they subject them to all these terrible, cruel experiences. It was a bit like that. And the other funny thing is the goat. The goat sort of developed insectophobia and sort of hid in the back of her A-frame for the next couple of weeks, and would pop her head out every now and again, and if a butterfly came past, she'd dive back into the back of the A-frame, bleating pitifully. Yeah. But she had a couple of kids a few weeks later, perfectly healthy, so it didn't hurt much harm. But it would have been absolutely hilarious to have watched. I mean, it would have been Mr. Bean and Benny Hill combined. But it taught me a good lesson. I don't know about you, Gary, but I quite often work bees without too much gear on, because the sort of bees that we have these days tend to be of a fairly gentle nature. Do you always wear full protective kit? Generally,
yeah, because we do a lot of visiting of clients' hives, and it's you never know what you're going to get.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you generally, and especially when you're moving bees at night.
Oh yeah. Oh, too right. Yeah.
Because
but I mean, if you got hives just out the back, say, and you're just doing a quick feed or something, a lot of beekeepers don't worry. They might have their smoker fired up, but they wouldn't worry about being totally togged up. But I think you find a level that is comfortable for you, but it does illustrate the importance of always having your protective gear to hand. That you don't want to get blasé about
oh,
it.
No.
They are dangerous animals.
Especially when the whole box is thrown on the ground. They can get quite angry.
Yeah, well, that's right. And in this case, it was my own fault, and I thoroughly deserved every sting I got, and it was educational for me.
Well, your story is going to go on to people all around the world, and they'll learn something from that, Nigel. So
hopefully they will.
It wasn't in vain.
Not to be so stupid. Yeah, that's right.
And not put their goats near the beehives.
Well, yeah, it was a silly thing having a goat anyway, because we could only it was a sort of suburban garden, and you can only have goats tethered in those circumstances because they're so destructive to any plant life.
Yeah.
So the goats and the bees, were not a great combination. But I was young and naive in those days, and I know better now.
Are you old and naive now, or just
well, I have a different type of naivety now. Yeah. But we talk about beekeeping, as a hazardous business, and it is true that every year there's, a couple of fatalities from anaphylactic shock. Bee venom can be, of course, incredibly dangerous for some people. We lost a teenager in Golden Bay just a couple of years ago, a tragic situation. So these aren't trivial things, but I think most beekeepers get fairly used to a few things and don't think too much of it.
No, we interviewed Frank Lindsay from Wellington, and his son is highly allergic to them, and to the point where he can't even go to Frank's house now.
Oh, right.
Because of the venom in the ear and stuff.
Yeah, I remember him telling me, and it was something about them being exposed to a sort of vaporized form when they were very little, made them vulnerable to it.
And I think so, people washing their bee suits with all the family washing and stuff like that. You've got to be very, very careful.
You wouldn't think of it, would you? But I think normally, I've had 5 kids, and they all got stung when they were little, and reacted, with a big red swelling, and thinking, oh God, how's this going to go? But when they got stung subsequently, it was much less. And I think that's the usual pattern for people as they get stung. It's a bit of a shock to the immune system, but then they build up a bit of resistance. So getting a few bee stings in your childhood is probably a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we always get stung, didn't we? It's like walking across fields and stuff. You get stung by clover and.
Yeah, that's right. So, part of growing up.
Yeah,
like falling off your bike and skinning your knee, isn't it?
Exactly.
You don't think too much of it.
No, you just got to be careful with washing your clothes, and also when you're transporting bee suits, you should put them in a plastic container if you've got kids in the car and stuff.
That's a good idea. Yeah, because it does vaporise, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. So you got to watch that. It just really annoys me when you go and click. I don't know if you click swarms in the Nelson area, but everyone that you click the swarm from, every single person's allergic.
Well, that's right, and you wonder whether they're using the term a bit loosely, and same with school kids. I
think it's used quite a bit. Like their definition of allergic is it goes red and it swells a bit. Yeah, I go, God damn, I'm allergic too.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Have another sting. It'll be good for you. Well, and the other thing is, a lot of people swear by stings as apitherapy, and I don't know that there's been any good science done on that, but I've had several very sensible people say that they suffer from bad rheumatoid arthritis, so swelling of the joints, and they find that bee venom is a big help in reducing that. So there's another element, that for some people it might actually be quite beneficial. But it's providing they're careful, of course.
Yeah, I mean, you can see that working because it makes your body try and send all these healing things to that area. So you can see how it would work for arthritis anyway. Yeah,
it works, I think, a bit like an antihistamine. So it can have a tonic effect, yeah.
Yeah, I heard of people, they get stung in the locations where you do acupuncture, and it's meant to heal other things, but I don't know how truthful that is. Yeah, you just have to be careful about advocating these things. You just say, with all these things, providing you have ensured that you're not allergic first. But yeah, I certainly, if arthritis isn't something that I have a problem with, but if I did, I'd certainly be trialling the bee sting for sure. No, absolutely, because it's quite it's terrible, when people get it in their hands and stuff.
Oh yeah, that's right, crippling.
Very crippling, yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. What is the biggest issue in Nelson with the bees at the moment, do you think?
As I said, Nelson's a fairly benign environment compared to some where the manuka gold rush has sort of created this highly fractious beekeeping scene. We're very lucky, actually. We've got a fantastic bee club that runs sort of monthly meetings and has good speakers and a demonstration apiary. And, the commercial guys come along and talk to us. Yeah, Nelson does have probably a fire ban in the forestry areas. It can be quite an issue. So around Nelson, we've got these big forestry areas which are high fire risk, and those sort of places can't even use a smoker. You should be using things like liquid smoke. If you've got an AFB hive that needs destruction, you have to burn it off-site. So that's a consideration. It's not a huge problem, but you just have to be aware of it if you're keeping bees in those areas. But generally, I think Nelson's a very benign environment for both the bees and the beekeepers. We have this lovely long spring-summer. We have a lot of hobbyists in Nelson. Nelson's a bit of a greenie capital. And one of the NTI guys told me that we've got, I think, over 70% of registered beekeepers hold their deca in Nelson, which is higher than the national average, which I think is around 50%. So that's an illustration, I think, of quite a high standard of responsible beekeeping.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So yeah, I think Nelson is a bit of a beekeeper's paradise, really. The one issue we have is wasps. Yeah. Well, there's a bit of beech forest around places like Pelorus and Nelson Lakes, and traditionally they've been quite severe wasp areas. But this new wasp poison, Vespex, they tell me is doing wonders at knocking the wasps back. So that's a big improvement.
Yeah, I heard good stuff about that. It's meant to be really good, and it's not attractive to bees, is it?
Yeah. Are wasps an issue up your way?
Yeah, they are. They are an issue. Yeah. Not so much at our place, but in other apiaries we've got. Yeah, absolutely. It can be really shocking.
I think anywhere where there's beech forest.
A lot of it's native forest, but I think a lot of the councils used that Vespex last season, so it sort of knocked them back for at least for last season. It was like hardly any wasps around here. Really good. So that's helped a lot. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, I think the population fluctuates anyway naturally, but yeah, the Vespex, from what I hear, is made world of difference, and certainly for honeydew producers, that's going to be a big issue. So if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do it? Is it, have you got a website or something?
No, I don't. I'm a little bit of a Luddite, Gary, I'm afraid. I've got probably well, in terms of the BeeSotted show, that's on freshfm.net is the website, and the show should be up for another few months yet. Probably email might be best. So my email address is costleymar@extra.co.nz. So that's costleymar@extra.co.nz. I'm very happy to field any comments and queries on bees. Particularly interested in finding if there's any interest in the establishment of feral bees in New Zealand project. As I said before, is something near to my heart and I think really worth pursuing. So there might be people out there with an interest in or skills in that regard. I'd love to hear from them.
We'll put that in the show notes, or if people leave a comment on the show notes for this one, it's kiwi.bz/Nigel. If you leave a comment, those comments will be sent to Nigel as well.
Oh, okay. Oh, good on you.
If some rich landowner out there's got a big lot of land we can use for that.
Might be a deciduous forest somewhere that was planted by some dotty old Englishman who came out here in the Victorian era. Who knows? And until you start looking, you have no idea. But I think it is definitely a drum with beating.
Absolutely. Well, it's been lovely talking to you.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. All the best with your podcast. Let's look forward to a good season. It's pretty early actually. It's got a lot of signs of spring around here. Kowhai's flowering and drones are being produced in large numbers.
Well, and of course today this has been recorded on the first day of spring, isn't it? So
it is. Wacko. Yeah. If we had a maypole, we'd dance around it.
We would.
Well, we beekeepers, we are pretty lucky, aren't we?
Yeah.
We get to go to some beautiful places and do some fantastic stuff in the world of nature. And for all these hassles we've been talking about, as small potatoes compared to to all the fun and enjoyment that we can have.
Oh, absolutely.
And, and dealing with good people too. So many thanks for that, Gary, and all the best for the season, and we'll talk again soon.
Well, that was a good one, and boy, quite a few chuckles in that lot. So what do you take away from that, Gary?
Well, I was quite surprised that in some areas of New Zealand, 48% of colonies are not registered.
That's so surprising, but yet not.
And maybe a population of feral bees can help the bees deal with mites. And also, on that funny story, goats and bees, maybe not a good combination, Nigel.
Maybe not.
So if you enjoyed that show, please subscribe in your podcast app, and we recommend Podcast Addict. Or if you want some other ideas, have a look at kiwi.bz/subscribe.
And also, guys, if you found anything of value in the work that we've done, please choose to sponsor us and support us through Patreon and become one of our supporters, and we appreciate it if you do. So thank you, and we hope you do.
That's right. It's kiwi.bz/banana. And we'll talk later. Thanks, guys.
Wonderful. Thanks, guys. See ya.